so Prince William reportedly froze mid-sentence when the folder was placed in front of him. And if you understand anything about how Kensington Palace operates, that kind of frozen silence is far more dangerous than any raised voice. The story leaking out of Windsor at this very moment involves 9 photographs, 1 embossed private menu card, 38 confirmed VIP attendees, and a tiny unauthorized royal cipher stamped directly beside Laura Lopes' initials. Laura Lopes, for anyone who needs a quick reminder, is Queen Camilla's daughter from her first marriage to Andrew Parker Bowles, and apparently someone very close to her decided to defy a written directive from the palace, press a royal emblem onto a private stationery run, and try to borrow the monarchy's prestige for what was supposed to be a modest charity supper. Before we walk through the details piece by piece, if you enjoy royal deep dives and behind-the-curtain breakdowns, do consider subscribing so you never miss the next update. Now let's talk about the Forbidden Gold cipher. To understand why this snowballed into such a quiet panic inside the palace corridors, we have to rewind about 40 hours. An email went out just after 6 in the morning. The tone was crisp, extremely diplomatic, almost surgically polite, but the message itself left absolutely no room for interpretation. Laura Lopes had been quietly organizing a private charity supper tied to a foundation she personally supports, and the palace put down clear boundaries. The gathering could not take place inside the oak drawing room at Windsor. No royal insignia could appear on any menu, invitation or place card. No press photographers, no corporate branding, no sponsor banners. The instruction was final, not a suggestion, not a starting point for negotiation, just final. Laura's small personal office received the email, and the palace server logged a read receipt at 6:14 confirming it had been opened and viewed for nearly 4 minutes. But nobody responded. Not a courteous acknowledgement, not a polite pushback, nothing at all. That silence alone was a red flag, and mild irritation started rippling through the senior royal aides. But what happened next escalated that irritation into a full-blown internal crisis. About 28 hours later, 3 unmarked delivery vehicles rolled up to a service entrance near the Norman Gate at Windsor. They were carrying soft lighting rigs, a curved champagne wall, oversized floral centerpieces, and heavy embossed gift boxes tied with silk ribbon. They also lacked the proper visitor authorization stamps, but the paperwork clipped to the clipboard described the cargo as a private family delivery for Her Majesty. That single phrase changed all the rules on the ground. The first vehicle was waved straight through the barrier while the second driver was stopped almost by pure chance, because one of the tall cardboard cases tipped over and split open on the gravel during unloading. Inside that broken case were dozens of menu cards printed on ivory cotton stock with raised black lettering and thick gold borders. And resting directly beside Laura Lopes' initials was a small royal cipher, the very symbol she had been explicitly banned from using. So that's where things get genuinely strange. Why would someone spend a small fortune printing luxury stationery after receiving a strict written order forbidding it? That question landed on Prince William's desk at 7:52 the following morning. But there was a darker detail attached. The original design for that stationery had been approved by Laura's own team weeks earlier. It was tasteful, restrained, and completely harmless. No cipher, no palace wording, no suggestion whatsoever that the British monarchy was formally endorsing the event. The royal symbol had been quietly inserted into the artwork later, deliberately, after the warning email was sent. Prince William laid the 2 versions side by side on his desk. He noticed 5 additional words tucked beneath Laura's initials, by kind permission of Her Majesty. There was just one enormous problem. No such permission existed. Not from Prince William, not from the Lord Chamberlain's office, not from the King's private secretary, and, as it turned out later, not even from Queen Camilla herself in any formal capacity. Yet 38 highly influential guests had already been told the exact opposite. Wealthy philanthropists, board chairs of major charities, 2 former cabinet ministers, a well-known gallery director, and several titled aristocrats, people whose names command instant respect at any dinner table. This was no longer a modest family supper. On paper, it looked officially endorsed by the Crown. Prince William gave the order to shut the event down immediately. That should have been the end of it. It wasn't. Laura Lopes was already inside Windsor Castle. She had slipped in through a private family access point just before 8:40 in the morning, carrying a slim navy folder tucked under her arm. She was accompanied by 3 people who were not listed on the approved security manifest. A senior member of staff intercepted her calmly in a restricted corridor and respectfully explained that the supper had been cancelled by direct order. Laura didn't argue. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't cause a scene of any kind. She simply opened her navy folder, pulled out a single crisp sheet of paper, looked the staff member straight in the eye, and said, I have written authority to proceed." The staff member read the paper and his expression shifted dramatically. He stepped aside. "Wait, what authority?" That question tore through Windsor faster than any official memo ever could. Within minutes, senior aides' phones were ringing across 3 separate offices as they scrambled to determine who had signed that piece of paper. Nobody immediately recognized the signature, but the typed instruction at the bottom was crystal clear. "Please extend Mrs. Lopes every reasonable courtesy and assistance." It appeared to originate from the Queen's household, not the King's. To the general public, that distinction sounds insignificant, almost trivial. But inside the walls of the palace, it's a slow-burning fuse on a very old bomb. Queen Camilla has her own staff, her own patronages, her own diary, and her own budget lines. Still, her household absolutely cannot override a direct instruction issued in the King's name, and it certainly cannot do so inside a working royal fortress like Windsor. Prince William was furious. He ordered that the document be brought directly to his private office for examination, but it never arrived. Someone had quietly removed it from Laura's Navy folder before castle security could even make a photocopy. So now the problem had escalated to another level entirely. An order wasn't just being ignored. Evidence had mysteriously vanished into thin air. Prince William stopped treating this as a family misunderstanding and shifted into full lockdown mode. He demanded access logs, security camera feeds, written witness statements from every staff member on duty, and printed copies of every email exchanged about the supper for the previous 3 weeks. Then he issued his most aggressive demand of the morning. Under no circumstances was anyone to warn Queen Camilla directly. But she found out anyway. Of course she did. By 9:45 in the morning, the Queen had scrapped her private diary commitments and was already in a car speeding toward Windsor. Prince William was informed through a discreet aide that she wanted a family conversation, off the record, no notes. He sent back a cold reply. This was no longer a family matter. That message reached Camilla's car before she even arrived at the castle gates. She stepped out brimming with barely contained rage, but not about the supper being shut down. She was livid that palace staff had, in her words, interrogated her daughter in a corridor like a common trespasser. "My daughter is not a criminal," Camilla reportedly snapped the moment she entered the private sitting room. Prince William's response was icy. Then she should have no difficulty explaining the missing document. Camilla stood her ground, insisting there was no hidden document and no coordinated plan. Prince William remained completely unfazed. He slid a signed security statement across the polished walnut table. A veteran staff member had personally seen the paper. 2 junior assistants had openly discussed it near the pantry. Laura had literally used it to walk past a restricted checkpoint. And now, extremely conveniently, it had disappeared. Camilla read the statement twice before delivering a line that shifted Prince William's suspicion into outright fury. "Perhaps your staff acted overzealously." "Not palace staff, not the King's staff, your staff." Prince William caught the distinction immediately. He leaned forward across the table and said, quietly but firmly, "These people serve the crown." Camilla locked eyes with him and responded with 4 measured words. For the time being, that was all it took. The temperature in the room dropped drastically. This was no longer about place cards or champagne glasses or an evening supper. It had become a quiet shadow war over which authority would truly prevail in the reign that comes next. Then Prince William discovered something genuinely alarming on Laura's guest list. A prominent estate lawyer's name had been added by hand in the margin. He wondered, quite reasonably, why a specialist in estate transfers would be seated at a charity supper. He circled the name in red ink and requested a quick discreet background check. Within 18 minutes, the results were on his desk. The lawyer specialized in trusts, charitable foundations, and the discreet valuation of high-value heritage collections. That single detail made the decorations more important than the guest list. Prince William walked into the oak drawing room just as workers were quietly dismantling the champagne wall. Laura Lopes was near the marble fireplace speaking in low tones with an event coordinator. On a long side table behind her were 14 framed pieces. They were beautiful, historically significant, and privately valuable. But they were not on the official supper decor list. Prince William checked each label carefully. 13 of the pieces belonged to named private lenders with proper paperwork. The 14th had no lender's name at all. Just 3 words printed neatly on a small card. Royal Collection Reserve. That label should absolutely not have been sitting there. The Royal Collection is not a personal drawer of trinkets. You cannot borrow a masterpiece from it for a private supper the way you borrow a paperback from a friend. Items are meticulously logged, handled with cotton gloves, insured for millions of pounds, and moved only with dedicated security escorts and paperwork signed at 3 different levels. This particular painting, a small but historically significant landscape, Wasn't even authorized for movement out of storage. So how had it ended up in the oak drawing room? Laura claimed she genuinely didn't know. The event coordinator said it had arrived tucked among the official deliveries earmarked for the Queen. The Queen's household flatly denied sending it. 3 conflicting answers, and none of them added up. Prince William then noticed a small paper tag pinned to the reverse of the ornate gilded frame. It wasn't a museum tag. It wasn't an insurance tag either. It was a valuation tag, freshly printed, with a 5-figure reference number and a recent date. Someone wasn't merely displaying this painting for the evening. They were quietly having its current market value assessed. At that moment, Prince William lost his composure internally. But instead of shouting, he acted with cold precision. He ordered every door in the wing locked. Nobody could leave, use their phones, move files, or discard any papers until it was determined who truly owned the painting. Laura looked genuinely stunned. You cannot detain people at a family charity event. Prince William surveyed the room slowly. This stopped being a family event the moment someone stamped the cipher onto a menu card. Then Laura played her final card. She stared at Prince William and calmly claimed the painting no longer belonged to the royal collection at all. She said it had been given privately to her mother years earlier. It was a personal gift. Prince William asked, quite simply, who had given it to her mother. Laura paused. That single hesitation told him the answer before her lips ever formed the word. King Charles. The entire power dynamic in the room shifted in an instant. If King Charles had genuinely gifted a historically significant landscape to Queen Camilla, then Laura had every legal right to display it wherever her mother chose. If he hadn't, then someone was quietly exploiting the king's name to redirect millions of pounds worth of royal heritage into private hands. There was only one honest way to settle it. King Charles had to be brought into the room in person. Camilla was desperate to avoid his involvement. She argued the king had been battling his own health pressures and did not need this stress. She dismissed the painting as trivial, a small landscape of sentimental value only. She accused Prince William of turning a minor family courtesy into a full-blown constitutional crisis in front of the staff. Prince William ignored her entirely and dispatched a secure written note requesting the king's immediate presence in the drawing room. Then something bizarre happened. Camilla suddenly fell completely silent. She flicked her eyes toward Laura, who slowly turned her head toward the navy folder resting on the writing desk, the very same navy folder that had once held the missing authorization sheet. Prince William caught the exchange. He didn't ask for permission. He walked straight over, lifted the folder, and tipped its contents out across the table. Guest biographies, catering invoices, seating arrangements, printed dietary requirements, and insurance certificates spilled out in a disorganized pile. Still no authorization paper. Then a much heavier folded document slipped out from a hidden inner sleeve stitched into the folder's lining. It wasn't the single sheet the staff member had read earlier. It was something far more substantial. A sprawling, professionally bound draft proposal. The bold title printed across the top read, "The Consort's Heritage and Legacy Program." Read those words again. This was not about a single supper or the borrowing of a room at Windsor for one evening. It was an entire multi-year initiative. The proposal outlined a large recurring program of private cultural and philanthropic gatherings to be hosted quietly at royal residences, involving Camilla's extended family, hand-picked corporate patrons, ultra-wealthy donors, and a rotating selection of items from the royal collection presented as personal loans. Laura's Windsor supper was explicitly listed as the official soft launch. The soft launch that palace security had believed was merely a small charity dinner. The soft launch that had been formally ordered to stop. And yet, somehow, it had been allowed to continue. Now Prince William finally understood the tiny gold cipher on the menu cards. It wasn't just a decorative flourish, it was branding. Someone was meticulously constructing an unofficial royal operation running in parallel to the official one. A second quiet door into the monarchy. This operation, once seated properly among influential donors and politicians, would become almost impossible to shut down, because too many powerful outsiders would already be emotionally and financially attached to it. King Charles arrived shortly before 1 in the afternoon with no fanfare whatsoever. He walked in carrying a worn red dispatch box, took one long look at the scattered documents on the table, and then glanced across the room at the small landscape leaning against the wall. His expression fell instantly. He recognized the painting the second his eyes touched the canvas. When Prince William asked, plainly and directly, whether he had ever legally gifted it to Queen Camilla, Charles answered with one devastatingly quiet word, "No." Laura whipped her head toward her mother. Camilla remained completely silent, her jaw clenched tight. Charles insisted on seeing the valuation tag on the reverse of the frame and asked, in a low, steady voice, who had authorized the painting's movement out of storage. The room fell into an unbearable silence. He opened his red dispatch box and produced a signed, sealed, and confidential instruction dated barely 3 weeks earlier. The landscape, along with several other significant royal assets, was in the final stages of being placed into a formal family trust. The only beneficiaries listed by name in that trust were Prince William's 3 children, George, Charlotte, and Louis. This was why the estate lawyer had been added to the guest list. This was why the fresh valuation tag had been quietly attached to the frame. This was why the event had to happen right now, urgently, before the trust documents were signed and sealed. If the painting appeared publicly under Camilla's apparent control, even for a single evening, in front of 38 influential witnesses, it could genuinely change everything. Photographs and testimonies from wealthy guests could later support the argument that Camilla had already been treating it as her private property for years. It wouldn't prove ownership outright, but it would create doubt. Just enough doubt for lawyers to seize on and drag the trust process out for years in private mediation. Prince William turned to Laura. "Did you know?" Laura stammered that she had been told, very clearly, that the artwork legally belonged to her mother. When he pressed her firmly for the source of that information, she looked down at the floor and refused to answer. Charles didn't need her to speak. He slowly turned to look at his wife. The room fell silent again. In a genuine twist, Camilla flatly denied any secret transfer of assets. She stood her ground, claiming Charles had promised her the painting years ago in a private moment, without lawyers, without paperwork, but with sincerity. Charles stared at her as though trying to remember a quiet conversation that had suddenly, decades later, hardened into a legal question. Then Camilla reached into her handbag and pulled out an old, slightly yellowed piece of stationery in Charles's own handwriting. It was a birthday card from many years earlier, warm and personal. But at the bottom he had written a single damaging sentence. "One day, the little landscape shall be yours." There it was, a promise, in writing, in the king's own hand. But was it, legally speaking, a gift? That sentence ignited a fierce, low-voiced debate around the table. Camilla insisted it clearly demonstrated ownership. Charles argued it was simply an expression of affection, a romantic gesture, nothing more. Laura believed the matter was legally settled the moment the ink dried. Prince William saw the harsher truth beneath it all. A casual, affectionate promise was being weaponized to pull a valuable asset out of a trust intended for his 3 children. The whole nature of the confrontation shifted. It became a quiet legal battle over whether Charles's tender written words from years ago could override the formal signed trust document sitting on the table right now. Charles took the delicate birthday note carefully from Camilla's hand and placed it side by side with the official trust instruction. He called the estate lawyer forward and asked plainly for a professional opinion. The lawyer's answer was clinical and clear. The birthday message demonstrated intent and possibly generous affection, but it changed absolutely nothing in the eyes of the law. The signed trust document, executed with witnesses and proper legal formality, did. The painting belonged inside the trust, and the supper had no right whatsoever to display it as though it were Camilla's private property. But Prince William was not finished. He still wanted to know precisely who had printed the fake authorization document after the cancellation email had been sent, and how the paperwork had made it into Laura's Navy folder. He insisted they trace the missing paper to its source. Charles gave the order for a full internal search. Palace staff combed every office in the wing, checked every printer log, and worked with IT specialists to restore recently deleted emails from the previous 72 hours. At 2:31 in the afternoon, a visibly frightened junior aide walked in with the answer. The authorization had originated from a computer inside Camilla's private secretarial office, but Camilla herself had not signed it, neither had Laura. The signature belonged to one of Camilla's most trusted and longest-serving senior advisors. Prince William ordered her to come in immediately. She walked in with her chin high, carrying no notes, and did not flinch at the sight of the king. She confessed openly to drafting the wider program proposal, to instructing the printer to add the royal cipher to the menu cards, and to having the delivery vans logged under the Queen's secure family designation. Her explanation left everyone in the room speechless, including Camilla herself. The advisor claimed her actions were meant to protect the Queen. She said she genuinely believed Prince William's household had been quietly working for months to create a permanent division between the official royals and Camilla's blood family. She said she was frightened about the future. She had come to see Laura's program as a way to secure a permanent respected place for Camilla's family in high society, before the moment Prince William ever became king. She wanted no titles. She wanted no public money. She wanted access, influence, and a quiet, dignified position within the wider royal system for the people she had served loyally for years. She believed she was defending her queen, but in the process, she had used Laura as a pawn. This was the ultimate quiet betrayal. Laura had not woken up one morning intending to hijack royal property. She had been manipulated. She had been told the supper was fully approved. She had been handed a document signed by a trusted senior figure whose word she had never once had reason to question. She had been assured that the landscape legally belonged to her mother. When the first cancellation email had arrived in her inbox, Laura had chosen not to verify a single line of it. She had ignored the warning signs because the version of reality she had been sold was the version she wanted to believe. Prince William was not furious because Laura happened to be Camilla's daughter. He was furious because her name had been used to bypass security, to move priceless national assets, to silence questioning staff, and to convert personal wishes into what looked like royal commands. Charles dismissed the rogue advisor on the spot with a single quiet sentence. He personally shredded a stack of the gold-edged menu cards. The supper was cancelled without a single dinner plate being laid, and the landscape was securely repackaged and returned to the vault under armed escort. Camilla, feeling deeply humiliated, demanded a formal apology for the aggressive way Laura had been treated in the corridor. Prince William refused outright. Charles tried, awkwardly, to smooth the situation, but only made it worse. Camilla pointed directly at Prince William and accused him of humiliating her family in front of staff simply to assert his dominance before he had even become king. Prince William remained completely calm and replied that he was protecting the throne itself, because Charles had failed to draw a single firm boundary in more than 20 years. Nobody spoke after that sentence. The silence in the room was heavy, almost physical. Even Prince William seemed briefly shocked by his own words. Charles closed his eyes and appeared to feel every ounce of the accusation land. Beneath all the shouting and the chaos, Prince William was right. Charles had spent years quietly trying to blend two very different families under a single roof. He had wanted peace above all else, but he had never once made it publicly and privately clear where personal affection ended and where royal authority began. Now, one vague birthday promise had almost dragged his own young grandchildren into a nasty property dispute. One overzealous advisor had acted with almost unlimited assumed authority. One daughter had ignored a security order because she had been convinced that family closeness outweighed palace rules. Charles had wanted peace, but by refusing to speak clearly, he had quietly created chaos instead. The final blow did not fall until well after Laura Lopes had been discreetly escorted off the grounds. Prince William picked up the original guest list one more time. There were 38 names. 37 were confirmed invitees to the supper, but one name had been added by hand at the very last minute in a different pen. Prince William stared at the ink for a long moment. The handwriting was not Laura's, it was not Camilla's, and it definitely did not match the neat script of the dismissed advisor. Charles glanced at the paper and recognized the handwriting instantly. He had personally added that name himself, weeks earlier. He had added it before the cancellation email was ever sent, before anyone secretly tampered with the stationery, before anyone in the room had claimed to know nothing about the plan. Prince William slowly raised his eyes to meet his father's. The sense of betrayal in the air was so thick it felt breathable. Charles sank into his chair. The king had known about the underlying program from the very beginning. He had even suggested, informally, that Camilla speak to a specific lawyer about how such things could be structured. But when the proposal had started to grow ambitious and legally messy, he had quietly stepped back. He had allowed the palace machinery to move to shut it down without ever admitting his own early involvement in encouraging it. Charles had never explicitly told anyone to remove the painting from storage, but by remaining silent for months, he had allowed everyone around him to assume what he wanted and to act on their own reading of that silence. Camilla felt betrayed by her husband. Laura felt used by the palace system. Prince William felt the institution of the crown itself had been placed at risk. All three of them had been reacting, in their own ways, to a leadership vacuum that Charles had refused to fill for years. Prince William did not shout. He did not slam the folder shut. He picked up the guest list, walked slowly over to Charles, and placed it gently on the table in front of him. "You could have stopped this." Charles did not defend himself. He did not deny a single word. He looked at the empty space on the wall where the little landscape had rested only hours earlier. He looked at the torn gold-edged menu cards piled in the waste bin. Finally, he reached inside his jacket for a heavy fountain pen. He pulled the bound proposal toward him and drew one thick unbroken black line straight through the title, "The Consort's Heritage and Legacy Program." His hand shook slightly as he wrote a new standing rule beneath it, in clear letters, for the royal household. No private family member acts with royal authority. He signed his name with quiet finality. Camilla read the sentence twice in silence. Laura's name was not written anywhere on that page, but every single person in that room knew exactly whom it had been written for. Prince William quietly gathered his papers together, turned around, and walked toward the heavy oak doors. Behind him, Charles sat alone at the long table, surrounded by a yellowed birthday note that had once promised too much, a security order that had arrived too late, and a torn gold-edged menu card that should never have existed in the first place. Powerful signatures surrounded the king on every side of the polished wood, yet he sat quite alone in the wreckage of the clear words he had never quite managed to say. So, tell me this honestly. Did Prince William act decisively to protect the British monarchy from a genuine internal threat that had been growing quietly for years? Or did he take advantage of a small family disagreement to push Camilla's bloodline permanently away from the inner rooms of the palace before he ever wears the crown himself? Drop your honest verdict in the comments, because this story is far from finished, and the next chapter is already being written behind closed doors at Windsor.